West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
There is the new formation today of a unity government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu partnering with one of the opposition figures who was actually seen as his potential alternative, defense veteran Benny Gantz. And that is a plan, a unity government here that is supposed to go for the duration of the conflict. As I mentioned, if you think about it at a simple level compared to America, that's not something that the United States had happen between politicians, say, over Iraq or during Vietnam. They also have convened an emergency war cabinet amidst this possible ground incursion. Now, some analysts also note this new move today may also reflect a type of internal or political weakness for Netanyahu, who faces withering criticism since Hamas rampaged through those Israeli towns, as the Washington Post reports, and that the idea began with not Netanyahu, but that opposition politician I just mentioned, Gantz, who had immediately called for a unity government to be formed, and Netanyahu may have felt he had little choice as public support for the idea grew over the next 4 days. So this development reinforces a point that a lot of people have made. There is diversity in a broad range of views within Israeli society, just as there is within Palestinian society. Debates about how to govern, and certainly about what to do regarding these foreign policy rifts for both societies. Netanyahu's approach to both governing and the peace process has been very controversial for a long time inside Israel and within Israeli civic and political life. And both sides of this conflict, as I mentioned, have seen foreign policy decisions or inaction define people's lives, safety, and domestic politics for some time. So Israel's first focus right now, we can clearly see, is this emergency security challenge and the war itself. But Israelis are also concerned, according to what they say and accounts that we have, about the government's intelligence failure and the potential misallocation of military resources and a so-called level of political chaos spurred, Netanyahu's critics say, by his policies and judicial crackdown. Some argue within Israel that that has also undercut the cohesion of the country's well-known and, quote, powerful military, according to a breakdown there in the Associated Press. Now, all of those forces, of course, are working on a response to what is the single highest death toll from an attack since Israel's founding in one attack. And they're girding for the kind of war that could, again, upend everything for both of these societies and for the region with, let's be clear, based on what we're hearing and seeing, no apparent off-ramp, certainly no ceasefire on the table for some time. I mentioned the peace process and the history, which is part of our special coverage tonight. Veteran Middle East peace negotiator Dennis Ross, who also helped create the Oslo Accords, has previously warned that the breakdown of a real durable peace process actually feeds a dangerous status quo, where you have the occasional ceasefire punctuated by terrible terrorism and violence.
What comes next? If all we do is go back to the status quo ante, we're just basically biding time until this happens again. I think there needs to be a strategy not only for a ceasefire, I think there needs to be a strategy for what comes next.
That was about 2 years ago. Ross has much experience here. We quoted him earlier in our coverage this week. He was a special envoy in Oslo, where Israel and the PLO reached that deal, and you can see him there near President Clinton. He served as a diplomat and peace negotiator throughout that Clinton administration, as well as in the State Department under President Bush. There he is there with some of the principals, and you can see a younger Netanyahu. And Ross also served in the Obama administration. This week, Politico stated that, quote, no American diplomat is more familiar with the history of enmity between Israelis and Palestinians, perhaps, than Ambassador Ross. Ambassador Dennis Ross is our special guest tonight for an extended discussion of these issues. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Tough time for everyone, as we've taken care to emphasize. You know a lot of these people. You've been through this, as I said, so viewers understand. You were someone at the table with both sides, trying to get somewhere with progress for both societies, as I put it. So when you talked about the fact that ceasefires and the stalemate would never really quiet down, what did you mean, and do you tragically see this as one of those outcomes?
Look, I do, and I think I didn't remember that I had been on with you saying that 2 years ago, but I was concerned at the time if there wasn't something done that was more fundamental as it related to a demilitarization of Gaza, marrying it to a condition of reconstruction. We will do reconstruction, massive reconstruction, but there has to be a mechanism that guarantees demilitarization, or my concern then, and it remains, we're going to see this all over again. Now, I will say this. Israelis have had a paradigm since 2009 vis-a-vis Hamas. There was a significant conflict then. There was another one in 2012, another one in 2014, 2021, which we were just talking about. Every time there was a ceasefire that was negotiated, Hamas used that to rebuild and prepare itself for the next round. Israelis, since that time, basically felt they had found a model. They felt that model was one in which they could coexist with Hamas, they would manage these periodic conflicts, and it was less expensive to manage these periodic conflicts than it was to go back into Gaza. They had left Gaza in 2005, 100%. One of the interesting things that people forget, the first 6 months after Israel left Gaza, 100%, Hamas attacked the crossing points from Israel into Gaza. There were 6 crossing points. They moved people and goods in and out. They served Palestinian interests. They weren't a favor to Israel. And Hamas attacked those crossing points. And as a result, Israel reduced the number of crossing points from 6 to 2. So Israel came up with what it thought was, okay, we can manage this, and it's less expensive than having to go back into Gaza. Now, the problem is what we've now seen shattered all those illusions. The price that has been paid, the reality that Hamas acted just like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I mean, the scenes we have seen over the last few days are incomprehensible. How do you kidnap women in wheelchairs and take them back to Gaza? How do you decapitate babies in front of their parents? There wasn't a shred of humanity. This is exactly the kind of behavior that we saw from ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, within Israel, from left to right, and we now have a national unity government, from Israel, from left to right, there is an absolute conviction that once and for all, we have to remove the threat that Hamas poses to us, and we're not going to live with it any longer. So that paradigm of coexisting and managing the conflict, that's now over from an Israeli standpoint.
And so was that a foreseeable or even intended objective of Hamas in what is now happening?
I think that Hamas has miscalculated because they grabbed the hostages, anticipating that, okay, the way we will deter Israel from coming and doing that is by holding these hostages, because we see how sensitive Israel has been historically to holding hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu traded over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including many who were responsible for bombings in Israel, a lot of blood on their hands, for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. So the Hamas mindset was, We know their sensitivity to hostages, so we'll hold them. That'll deter the Israelis, and we'll emerge with a great victory. That was the Hamas mindset, but I think they fundamentally miscalculated.
Right, and as you say, and you remind people, the horrific math, the ratio on that is something where they have achieved, however you want to call it, objectively, tactically, those kind of trades before. They've even gotten some of their current leadership who are now hiding underground, actually were partly released through those kind of deals. So as you say, very close to home. I want you to stay with me. I'm going to show something with regard to again, we emphasize the history because there's a lot here. But you've certainly been at the table, and you have been relied on by leadership of the United States in both parties to try to reach peace deals. Some have worked. Some clearly, as you know and have said, have not. I want to show again, for our context tonight, 1993, the signing of that first Oslo Accord. Take a look.
The Prime Minister of Israel and the chairman of the PLO, who have spent most of their lives trying to destroy each other, here on a common platform at the White House, speaking of peace.
A handshake between two men who had been bitter enemies for decades.
If the spirit that prevailed here today can be extended, finally, there is hope for peace in a place where there has been war almost without end.
Hope for peace, the discussion then about an interim agreement, and I want to show now from 1995 what then Ambassador Ross said.
Those who are here want to deepen the process of peace, expand the process of peace, and build on it in a way that makes it more enduring and stable, and ultimately will lead to what I said, which is a comprehensive peace settlement.
The big question then, sir, what did work out of that, and what didn't? And what do you say to the concern inside Israel and from some of its allies in the United States that you and that government were sitting at the table with Palestinian leadership that were willing to make more of a deal than certainly, I say this with quite obviousness, Hamas as a force today?
So a number of things I would say. That initial breakthrough was psychologically extraordinary because the PLO denied the existence of Israel and rejected it. Israel denied the existence of the PLO and rejected it. You had an existential conflict between two national movements competing for the same space. Suddenly, when you had a mutual recognition, you were saying what was an existential conflict could be turned into a political conflict.
It is Friday, the 13th of October of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So drink up, even if it's a non-alcoholic beverage. Let's make a toast to the fact that it's Friday the 13th, and you know what that means. What does it mean? Actually, it marks the day that the Templar Knights had, I think, all of their property confiscated by the Catholic Church, and essentially it was a night of the long knives of the day. I pretty much think that's probably what it was. So, nice day to be having a conflict in the Middle East, considering, the plunder that the Templar Knights brought back. Okay, well, I guess that conflict's been going on for quite some time. All I know is I don't like babies being killed. I don't like old people being killed either. And I don't like the people in between, the baby and the old people being killed in, war. I just don't. Call me a romantic. But I will say, somebody slaps me in the face, I really will try not to retaliate out of reflex. I'll try. Slap me twice, and maybe my slapback might be a little bit more calculated. Might be. Okay, well, I believe in nonviolence. I don't know necessarily if I'm a pacifist, because I'm not going to stand there and take it. All right? And I wouldn't expect anyone else to. I'm not going to let someone overrun my door. Really, I mean, of course, there's also a way to resist that you only resist in proportion to what you need to resist. You know, the old Kung Fu motto of walk away rather than resist. Resist rather than fight. Fight rather than maim. Maim rather than kill. What is there past that? There was nothing. You don't kill. So maybe I am a pacifist. I don't know. But I will practice nonviolence. But, there are caveats to that, of course. One can defend themselves. Redirect that energy away from you. And how do you do that? Sometimes you gotta, punch them in the gut. Sometimes. I don't know. Maybe a body shot, then move up to the head. Work your way up. As the founders originally intended. So, now we have another Middle East conflagration. And what does that mean? Just in time for the elections, yeah. And Bibi thinks that his his heavy-handed approach of, we'll just use a sledgehammer and destroy the whole anthill to get that one little ant. Well, I guess that's one way of handling it. What's going to happen then? You might get a swarm. Might. So there's a lot of bad actors involved in this. I mean, we can put a lot of blame upon Bibi and doing what he's doing in the Gaza. And you can put a lot of blame on Hamas by using the people of Gaza as body shields, human shields, and then say, well, you're trying to go through the human shield to get to that back there and the morality of that. Yeah, I understand it completely. That's why we don't want to have that. Which begs the question, why does Egypt not open up their border? Because I'll tell you why. They don't want to set a precedent. We accept refugees from a war, then every refugee from a war is going to want to come here. And we can't have that, not in our backyard. Sounds familiar, huh? Sure does. Now, Bibi was smart. He'd start putting Gazans on buses and trains and whatever, and just dumping them in Egypt. Surprise. Greg Abbott said to do it. So we did. See how that works. Blinken met with, I think, Abbas, the leader of Jordan. He's making the rounds because what Hamas did cannot be excused. There's no excuse for that. And is there a retribution to be exacted? Well, that's exactly what is happening, isn't it? I just don't like the idea of innocent people being caught up in it and being the face of punishment. And people can go home, feel good about themselves later. Give me a break. So I suppose if there's all these tunnels underneath all of these buildings or whatnot, we got to have some tunnel rats go in there and rat out the tunnel. Maybe you might want to move the human population away from that. so you can raise the buildings to subterranean levels. Kind of hard, I know. Hence, the negotiations with the countries in the region. Because you don't want, I don't know, all of the Huckabee-type Christians are like rubbing their hands in glee. It's the apocalypse. It's the end of the world, finally. Yeah, wait until the end of the world hits them. Jesus. And I mean that seriously. Jesus Christ. I don't mean that as an invective. I mean it as a plea. Please. Oh, my gosh. So, yeah, they, with a capital T, think that it's the end of the world, just as the Bible prophesied. Well, the Bible didn't prophesize that. Let's be clear. The Four Horsemen was kind of Dante-esque. Might want to throw a little Milton in there, too, eventually. People forget. Stages of hell, right here, pal. Okay. So if we're going to go to hell in a handbasket, I don't want to. Especially since the handbasket is right here and it looks pretty hellish. We don't need to go anywhere. But as human beings, we do have the capability of changing and, commanding our surroundings. So why don't we command peace? Well, we could if we had a little bit of responsibility about it. We need tunnel rats to go through the tunnels and get Hamas. There's a little preparation to be had, especially when it involves a civilian population. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's not only a war, it's a crime, and a crime scene. So maybe we need a few cops. We might. Okay, well, I could go on, and of course, since this has been going on since at least the Templars, at least, then we'll actually have to be before the Templars because there were, a few encroachments here and there anyway. Well, nonetheless, since this conflict has been going on since time immemorial, as they like to say in the old days, you'd think we would have had a solution by now. But you know what? It just shows that human nature is human nature, and by God, we have to modify it, don't we? That is what is meant by being evolved. Jesus. Okay. Enough of my pontificating. I've just pontificated, and it's Friday the 13th. Okay. Templar this. What do we have in store for you in the curated part of the show? Well, of course, Hamas has relentlessly attacked the peace process for its own agenda since at least the 1980s, because they were formed in 87, so, whatever iteration they were before, infantada. Then on the rest of the menu, a Colorado judge has rejected an attempt by Trump to dismiss a lawsuit that seeks to keep him off of the state ballot. A Florida college reported it has seen 27% of its student body drop out since Ron DeSantis' recent takeover. And a Mississippi city was sued for failing to properly inform property owners in a majority black neighborhood that their homes could be targeted for eminent domain under a redevelopment plan. What? Wow. That's taking redlining to a new level. After the break, we move to the chef's table where French prosecutors are investigating the suspected poisoning of a Russian journalist who fled after denouncing the war in Ukraine on live TV. And we reported when she did that. And the European Union made a formal, legally binding request for information from Elon Musk's social media platform over its handling of hate speech, misinformation, and violent terrorist content, like snuff flicks, related to the Israel-Hamas war. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Leakin. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from the chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on, an inexpensive bauble. Or how about something easier, a cup of coffee, an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance. If you could send us those funds instead, we're able to pool those funds with like-minded folk who have sent us the same, and therefore we're able to pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over 13 years now. So thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. Okay, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, we'll get on Blue Sky soon, I promise. Because it's there. You can do so by going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on all those social media platforms and more. Like even on Tumblr. I'm on Tumblr. Can you believe that? Instagram, Facebook. Oh my God, Facebook. But it's there, and I'm there. Been there for a long time. They tried to kick me out. But they couldn't. Anyway, you can follow me at Justice Putnam or simply Justice Putnam, depending on what platform you're on. And I post the show notes and links diary, incidentally, 10 minutes before showtime. And incidentally, I put that out there because people want to read the actual articles, and I insist they do. And you can find those quite easily if you follow my social media feeds, because the links are all there. They're there. So follow me at Justice Putnam or Justice Putnam. You know what to do. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, wherever podcasts can be found. You just can't find them on Stitcher because where is it? It's no longer there. Okay. But we'll see how we can rectify that matter. We're still working on it, folks. Still working on it. Sirius XM. Yeah. Okay, let us now tuck into this first offering. And the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We do the chef's table at the end because we're Americans. We do everything backwards here. Salads at the beginning instead at the end of the meal. Who thinks of doing that? Americans do. So we put the chef's table at the end, okay? Just making it clear. But here in the Bistro Cafe, our first offering is by Meade Groover and Nicholas Riccardi out of the Associated Press. A Colorado judge has rejected an attempt by Donald Trump to dismiss a lawsuit that keeps him off the state ballot, ruling that his objections on free speech grounds did not apply. Trump's attorneys argued that a Colorado law protecting people from being sued over exercising their free speech rights shielded him from the lawsuit, but Colorado District Judge Sarah Wallace said that law doesn't apply in this case. The law also conflicted with a state requirement to get the question about Trump's eligibility resolved before a January 5th deadline for presidential candidates' names to be certified for the Colorado primary, Wallace wrote. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, crew in Washington, claims in its lawsuit that putting Trump on the ballot in Colorado would violate a provision of the 14th Amendment that bars people who have, quote, engaged in insurrection, end quote, against the Constitution from holding office. I think this was the case in which Trump argued that he wasn't bound to, not protect the Constitution, administer it. It was something weird. Boy, for the first time in our constitutional history, this guy comes up with the weirdest things, and we're supposed to treat him like normal. Well, the group's chief counsel, Donald K. Sherman, welcomed Wallace's decision, which was made late on Wednesday. He called it a well-reasoned and very detailed order in a statement yesterday, Thursday. A Denver-based attorney for Trump, Jeffrey Blue, didn't immediately return a phone message yesterday, Thursday, seeking comment, because why would they ever? They never do. The Colorado case is one of several that are involving Trump that stand to test the Civil War-era constitutional amendment. Well, it's actually Reconstruction, okay? But we're not going to quibble too much here. And that has never been ruled on by the U.S. Supreme Court. Oh, goody, we get to do it with this one. Oh, boy. Along with lawsuits filed in Minnesota and Michigan, it has a good chance of reaching the nation's high court. The Colorado case will focus in part on the meaning of insurrection under the 14th Amendment, whether it applies only to waging war on the U.S. or can apply to Trump's goading of a mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6 to halt the certification of President Joe Biden's win. I think using violence to upset the peaceful transfer of power is pretty much war against the United States. But Trump's attorneys dispute that it applies to his attempt to undo the election results. They also assert that the 14th Amendment requires an act of Congress to be enforced and that it doesn't apply to Trump anyway. Trump swore a presidential oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, but the text of the 14th Amendment says it applies to those who have sworn oaths to support the Constitution. Blue pointed out the semantic difference in an October 6th filing in the case. Both oaths put a weighty burden on the oath taker, but those who wrote the amendment were aware of the difference, Blue argued. Oh, wow. Well, the framers of the 14th Amendment never intended for it to apply to the president, he wrote. And I would say, as a scholar, minor, of constitutional history, that is exactly what they meant. Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is out of Raw Story by Maya Bodie. A Florida college reported this week it has seen 27% of its student body drop out since Florida Governor and 2024 Repug presidential candidate Ron DeSantis' recent takeover, marking the lowest retention rate of first-year students in the University of South Florida's Sarasota campus in its whole history, the New Republic reported. What DeSantis once described, as per the New Republic, as a culture of woke indoctrination has been replaced by one of censorship. Student murals have been painted over, and student orientation leaders were forbidden from wearing pins expressing support for Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ plus community, reported the New York Times. Last month, The Guardian reported approximately 125 graduates or undergraduates have transferred to other colleges or universities or dropped out in the face of what some have likened to a hostile right-wing takeover of New College, Florida. Hampshire College in Massachusetts has admitted 36 new college students ahead of this fall semester after it guaranteed admission to all applicants in good academic standing at the state-run college and pledged not to increase their existing tuition costs. The college's leadership team, the New Republic reported, has been upended. 6 members of the Board of Trustees have been replaced by DeSantis allies, while the college's president was ousted and replaced with the administration's former education commissioner, Richard Corcoran. The school has also suffered a faculty exodus, the elimination of the college's diversity office, and the firing of its academic librarian. The Guardian noted that the exodus of staff represented a staggering 40% of the entire faculty who were employed during the spring semester of the 2022-2023 academic year. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Mississippi city failed to properly inform property owners in a majority black neighborhood that their homes could be targeted for eminent domain under a redevelopment plan. Some residents argued in a federal lawsuit filed yesterday, Thursday. The lawsuit, filed in the U.S. Southern District of Mississippi, said the coastal city of Ocean Springs created an urban renewal proposal in an area that includes the properties of 4 residents and a local Baptist church. A move by the city to declare parts of the area blighted could allow it to exercise eminent domain. You know, the government transfer of property from private to public. The property owners alleged the South Mississippi city did not provide them an adequate opportunity to challenge the plan. Ocean Springs cannot brand neighborhoods as slums in secret, said Dana Berliner, litigation director for the Institute of Justice, a public interest law firm representing the property owners. Depriving people of their property rights without any process is a clear violation of the U.S. Constitution. The lawsuit asked the court to declare state urban renewal codes that the city followed unconstitutional. In a statement yesterday, Thursday, Ocean Springs Mayor Kenny Holloway said the city's proposed plan follows Mississippi statute and that Mississippi Attorney General Fitch will address the claims that the statutes are unconstitutional. The city's proposed urban renewal plan has not violated anyone's rights. It is unfortunate that our residents have chosen to file a lawsuit instead of having a constructive discussion with the city. I have personally invited residents to my office to explain and answer questions, Holloway said, in an accent totally made up that has nothing to do with Mississippi, apparently. While residents were given the option to remove their property from the proposed plan, the mayor said, The plan is focused on urban renewal as a strategy to drive economic development. It defined an urban renewal project based on a Mississippi statute approved in 1972 that says municipalities can stop the development or spread of slums and blight, which may involve slum clearance and redevelopment in an urban renewal area. I suppose if black people have moved into the neighborhood, it's become a slum in Mississippi. All right, let us go to our break. And let's hope these people prevail and make more money than not even what the properties might be worth. Let's hope. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, not what you might expect. The trailers for The Creator would have you prepared for a Terminator or Independence Day-style shoot-'em-up, and in fact, the first few minutes of the film, after the faux 50s robot newsreels, lean that way as well, with our protagonist, John David Washington's Agent Joshua Taylor, losing his wife to the enemy, and thus being appropriately motivated. That enemy is the AI-controlled nation of New Asia, supposedly responsible for the nuclear destruction of Los Angeles 10 years prior. His righteous cause is soon muddied as what follows is an off-ramp into what the U.S. Army dubbed, 100 and some years ago, going native for soldiers who started developing doubts about the genocide with which they were involved. It's not that we haven't seen this before, think Avatar, but there's more going on here as the U.S.'s commitment to destroy all AI becomes commingled with destroying a non-white culture that apparently lives in peace with AI. Says the robot simulant Alfie at the center of the plot, I want all robots to be free. And then there's the idea of non-human rights, which in modern sci-fi is often a convention to define humanity. With a budget a third of similar pictures, director Gareth Edwards has achieved a gritty yet stunning look here. It's shot ultra-wide with a Sony prosumer camera with natural lighting and what are termed guerrilla filmmaking techniques. The effects are spare, with most of that budget going to the awesome depiction of the Allies' Nomad weapons platform, which is both a menacing and symbolic presence. Daring directing, spectacular production design, and good acting overcome some script shortcomings and flirtations with cliché to make The Creator one not to miss. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For older adults, optimal aging includes preventing injuries, effectively managing existing chronic conditions, and maintaining physical and cognitive health and social engagement. I'm Dr. Linda Anderson, Director of CDC's Healthy Aging Program. The promotion of cognitive health is a critical component of overall good health. Cognitive health among older adults is not just the absence of disease. It's the development and preservation of cognitive abilities such as memory, language, judgment, and remembered skills such as driving. Cognitive abilities enable individuals to maintain social connectedness, an ongoing sense of purpose, and the ability to function independently. In 2013, CDC and the Alzheimer's Association released the second in a series of roadmaps. This roadmap, the Public Health Roadmap for State and National Partnerships 2013 to 2018, was developed as part of CDC's Healthy Brain Initiative. It reflects the insights and expertise of a wide range of stakeholders at the national, state, and community levels. The roadmap shares the Healthy Brain Initiative's vision of cognitive health as a vital component of overall health and well-being, an area ripe for public health efforts. Specific actions are addressed in 4 traditional domains of public health. The first is monitor and evaluate. Tracking the health of the nation is a fundamental public health function. Actions in this area include assessments related to cognitive health that help quantify and qualify the public health impact and inform public health policies and strategies. The second domain is educate and empower the nation, which focuses on actions that raise public awareness and improve access to information and resources. The third domain, develop policy and mobilize partnerships, includes actions aimed at ensuring that cognitive health is integrated into a broad spectrum of public health work. The fourth area, assure a competent workforce, focuses on preparing public health professionals to translate current and emerging findings on cognitive health into effective public health practice. This roadmap provides a solid foundation for the public health community to anticipate and respond as new scientific discoveries related to cognitive health emerge. Public health agencies and partners are encouraged to work together on actions that best fit their mission, needs, interests, and capabilities. For more information, please visit cdc.gov/aging/healthybrain.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments Wednesday on a South Carolina racial gerrymandering case we followed closely. Justices who voted to overturn the maps in Alabama weren't as ready to throw the flag this time. October 11th, justices were supposed to consider arguments on whether the appeals court made a mistake when it rejected South Carolina's congressional voting district maps in January. South Carolina's legislature split Charleston by moving 30,000 residents from 11 of 12 of the highest concentrations of black voters into another district. In the words of the lower court, bleaching Congressional District 1. Conservative justices seem not to look for errors, but rather were spoiling for a fight on the merits of the case, despite the lower court having weighed testimony from 42 witnesses and considered 652 exhibits. The South Carolina legislature freely admits that it gerrymandered for partisan advantage, but disputes that it did so for racial discrimination reasons. Seeming to agree, Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Coney Barrett, Alito, and Gorsuch cited a lack of evidence of racial gerrymandering. Roberts cited not meeting the alternative map requirement showing how districts should be drawn. Justice Kagan argued that no such requirement exists. A ruling is pending, but it now seems clear that the Alabama-Milligan decision was a narrower decision than democracy advocates had hoped. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. That was the day that the first Industrial Congress of the United States met in New York City. People interested in the problems facing working people, including long hours, low pay, and unsafe working conditions, gathered together. The labor movement was just beginning in this country. These were the years when the early trade unions were formed. Women played an important role in the early labor movement. Female textile mill workers in Lawrence, Massachusetts began to organize for the 10-hour day. In 1844, they established the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. Their goal was to improve working conditions in the mills. The Lowell Women's Group sent a representative to New York for the Labor Congress. Another important development of the fledgling labor movement was the establishment of labor presses. George Henry Evans, a labor newsman, also attended the Congress. He was the editor of a series of U.S. labor papers, starting with the Workman's Advocate in 1829. He had come to the United States from England, where he had been involved in the trade labor movement. He also attended the Labor Congress. The meeting recommended the formation of 3 organizations. First was an industrial brotherhood for workers, including farmers. The second was an industrial sisterhood for women workers. The third was a group for friends of labor. The Congress met again in New York in 1847, then again met in Chicago in 1850. These early efforts to establish larger labor groups did not gain much traction, but they began to lay the framework for workers to come together to discuss their challenges and imagine how they could work together to bring about change for better wages, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, so a bit cooler from yesterday. Partly cloudy skies during the morning, and we'll be giving way to rain showers this afternoon through tonight. Highs in the mid-60s, as I mentioned, winds light and variable. Then mostly cloudy skies tonight with that rain. Lows in the upper 40s, winds light and variable. And then cloudy tomorrow with a bit more rain. Highs bumping around 70, winds light and variable. Looks like we might have some rain off and on until Monday, and then we'll get lots of rain on Monday, and maybe even more for the following days. We'll see how that works. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 16 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at level 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.84 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 68 degrees and fair with potential disruptions due to rain. Paris is 75 degrees and sunny at the moment, though they have a potential disruption due to wind and also rain. Rome is 78 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 60 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 57 and clear. Hong Kong is 78 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 60 degrees and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 57 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and fair. Chicago, Illinois is 58 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 59 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. French prosecutors are investigating a suspected poisoning yesterday, Thursday, of a Russian journalist who fled after denouncing the war in Ukraine on live TV. Marina Ouisghian called emergency services and was hospitalized after suddenly falling ill as she left her Paris apartment and said she suspected she was poisoned. Police were examining her apartment and an investigation was underway, the prosecutor's office said. Media watchdog Reporters Without Borders, who helped Ouisghian escape Russia and settle in France, said its team has been at her side since she sought medical attention. The group, known also by its French acronym RSF, did not have further information about what happened. Ouisghian, who worked at Russian state television Channel 1, drew international attention in March of 2022 after appearing behind the anchor of an evening news broadcast with a sign that said, "Stop the war, don't believe the propaganda, they are lying to you." She was charged with disparaging the Russian military and fined about $270 at the time. She later staged a protest near the Kremlin in July of 2022, was detained and placed under house arrest before escaping to France with her daughter. Earlier this month, a Moscow court sentenced her to 8.5 years in prison in absentia for spreading false information about the Russian army. It was the latest example of a Russia crackdown on dissent that has intensified since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 20 months ago. The scale of the crackdown has been unprecedented in post-Soviet Russia.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Kelvin Chan of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Commission on Thursday yesterday made a formal, legally binding request for information from Elon Musk's social media platform X, it's really Twitter, over its handling of hate speech, misinformation, and violent terrorist content related to the Israel-Hamas war. It is the first step in what could become the EU's inaugural investigation under the Digital Services Act, in this case, to determine if the site formerly known as Twitter, well, it still is known as Twitter, is in compliance with the tough new rules meant to keep users safe online and stop the spread of harmful content. San Francisco-based X, really known as Twitter, has until Wednesday to respond to questions related to how its crisis response protocol is functioning. Responses to other questions must be received by October 31. The Commission said its next steps, which could include the opening of formal proceedings and penalties, would be determined by X's replies. Representatives of X did not immediately respond to a message-seeking comment. The company's CEO, Linda Yaccarino, well, she's CEO for a while. I think she's going out. Said earlier that the site has removed hundreds of Hamas-linked accounts and taken down or labeled tens of thousands of pieces of content since the militants militant group's attack on Israel. One social media expert called the actions a drop in the bucket. I don't even think it's that. Iaccarino said on Thursday yesterday, outlined steps taken by the company to combat illegal content flourishing on the platform. She was responding to an earlier letter from a top EU official for information on how the company is complying with the EU's new digital rules during the Israel-Hamas war. That letter was essentially served as a warning, was not legally binding. The latest one, however, is. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.